Hello and welcome back to the Cozy Design Studio, or if you're new here, welcome. My name is Nick and I talk about all things cozy. Today we're going to be taking a look at why so many cozy games feel so inherently queer. Let's start by getting my credentials out of the way first. I am, as some of you will be aware, a bisexual man. Now, I'm what most people would consider a baby bi, because I only really came to terms with this about a year ago, so if anything I say here is maybe not quite accurate to your queer experience, or if you think I missed anything, do please let me know in the comments. I always love to learn more, and you all are always so insightful. Also, I'm going to be using queer a lot in this video. I understand some people find that to be offensive still. However, it is the thing that I think I identify with the most, and I personally find it to be the most encompassing term, and it's also just a lot easier than saying LGBTQ a million times, and I just want you to know that I'm saying it with love. But I would really like to know if a lot of you kind of prefer that I use a different word, so just let me know down in the comments if that's the case. But, okay, let's get to the actual meat and potatoes. Cozy games are, in my opinion, inherently queer. Let me explain. Games in general, or at least in the eyes of the general public, are very much a toxically masculine hobby. They're about guns, fighting, stealing cars, and lots of sexy ladies. And honestly, I can't exactly blame someone for holding that opinion of video games. Generally speaking, the image isn't great, and it certainly isn't welcoming to a lot of women and girls. Cozy games are, in many ways, a reaction against that idea of video games that most people hold. For many queer people, cozy games create a safe space away from the generally negative and combative world of mainstream games. For many queer folks, their day-to-day life is enough of a fight to survive as it is, so the last thing they want from a video game is to have to face even more of that. Cozy games like Animal Crossing or Stardew Valley can serve as a bit of an escape, a safe space away from all of that, and a space where they can really express themselves authentically without having to worry about what other people think about them and their choices. Now, I do think that it is still very much a good thing to be able to work on yourself in the real world and push past the feeling that you have to adhere to what society wants from you, as long as it's safe to do that. And getting yourself to a point where you can wear whatever you want, act however you want, and be whoever you want to be in the real world is ultimately going to be far more fulfilling than simply being reliant on a video game fantasy. However, for many people, that simply isn't an option right now, so something like cozy games gives those people a place to explore how they might feel in different clothes, how they might want to interact with other people, and what kinds of relationships they might want for themselves. And that, I think, is why there are so many queer people in the cozy space. From what I can tell, a good portion of my audience would fall somewhere under the LGBTQ umbrella, and that's for good reason. These games aren't selling themselves on the power fantasy of it all, or the appeal of attractive ladies all clad in spandex. Or rather, they can and do, but the tone that they do it with is what differentiates them. Many people consider dating sims to be very cozy, but they still heavily sexualize their characters. And I'm not speaking for all dating sims here, but the general attitude in the cozy space is very positive towards them. And I think that's because of the focus on conversation and relationship over simple animal attractiveness, though that is still a factor. These games do depict their characters as peak attractive and complete fantasies of what human people look like, but they do it in a way that makes those people not just feel like a piece of meat to be leered at. And the attractiveness is much more geared towards the feminine gaze, which is far less focused on the pure revealingness of the outfit and more about how the person wears it. They are attractive people that you are meant to find sexually appealing, but they are, more importantly, characters and people. And that's not even to mention the fact that the entire idea of a dating game is centered around dating anyone you want. So whereas in something like an RPG, you might get to see your own sexuality represented, and we have seen great strides in that aspect of more modern RPGs, in these dating sims, that's kind of the whole point. Date whoever you want and be whoever you want to be. Now, I'm not a dating sim guy myself, so I don't have firsthand experience in this department. But when I hear people who are into it talk about it, that's the picture that I get. And when you compare that to, like, say, the way mainstream gamers talk about something like Eve in Stellar Blade, it's a very stark difference. When I hear people talk about these cozy dating sims, they talk about the conversations they have with the different characters and all the personality traits they either love or hate about those different characters. It's about how they relate to the characters they meet and not just how they look. And that's a big theme in cozy games and queerness in general. Queerness in the modern day is, for many people, very heavily focused around found family, and finding a community that accepts you for who you are. And that's a very prominent theme throughout a lot of cozy games. Just try to think off the top of your head how many cozy games involve moving away from the big city to start a new life away from it all, doing what you really love with people who share your same values. It's almost cliche at this point with how many games use it as a framing device. But they use it because it resonates. For many queer people, that is what queerness is. Rejecting the life that you were born into to find something better with people who you love and who love you for you in a new world with a new place where you can really pursue what matters to you. Society be damned. I can't overstate how important found family is in the queer community, particularly for a lot of older queer people. Fortunately, the world is getting slightly more accepting, so younger queer people like myself and others I know don't really have to rely on it quite as much as we would have if we had been born maybe 20 years earlier. However, a lot of people still have to leave what they grew up in and reject what they knew and take the extremely scary and lonely step of getting away from an environment which doesn't accept them for who they are, oftentimes leaving their entire social fabric behind. And in these cozy games where you're moving away to chase your dreams, you almost never even think about your family. You maybe get a note or something at the beginning, but then after that, your family is the people you meet. The relationships that matter are the ones close to you and not the people you left behind. You're not wasting time on people who aren't accepting you. You're integrating into this new society of people who do accept you. And the protagonists in these games rarely face all that much adversity entering this new society and finding their people. After all, it's a story that is written to unfold in a specific way, and I think this ease of integration really makes for a welcoming environment to queer people who might just be looking for a fantasy to escape into without all the baggage of the real world. Now, it's rarely as on the nose as I'm describing it. In fact, most of the time, you kind of get the feeling that you're on fine terms with your family, but I think the connection is still there for a lot of people. And the fact that these games often let you romance whoever, regardless of gender, makes for a very inclusive and safe-feeling world to inhabit. That feeling of safety and belonging is what a lot of people associate with being cozy. Cold nights by the fire with your family, snuggled up in a warm bed while the rainstorm rages outside, being comfortable and warm with the people you care about, contrasted with the exact opposite right outside your window. It's that feeling of the sublime which makes for most cozy experiences. Things most people generally agree are cozy. You can't have the cozy night by the fire if it isn't cold as sin outside the window. And in many cozy games, sure, you are just kind of chilling on your farm or in a town somewhere, but oftentimes some of the most memorable for people are when you have to ward off some looming threat, and it really doesn't matter how big the scale is. It could be a world-ending demon like in Zelda, or the ever-encroaching tentacles of capitalism slowly tightening around your small town like in Stardew. Regardless of its scale, it's that contrast that really makes for a classically cozy experience. And to connect it with queerness again, it's that element of defending what you have against the encroaching danger. Unfortunately, for many in the community, the fight for freedom and the fight to protect and preserve the connections and communities that we have is a constant one. Sometimes, for every win, it feels like there are two losses, but the people around us show us why it's worth staying in the fight, and they give us something to care about and something to fight for. Okay, that's some more intangible reasons that cozy games feel queer. But what about the harder reasons? What is it structurally that makes cozy games more appealing to queer people and a queer audience? Well, to start, indie developers dominate the cozy space. Sure, there are lots of cozy games from big-name developers with vast 10-cent coffers to fund development, but the large majority of cozy games that people actually talk about and really care about are the much more grassroots games by developers who are in it for the art and not necessarily just the money. And that's not to say that they shouldn't be paid. You should absolutely pay for your indie games if you can afford it. But my point is the majority of cozy games that I cover are from small indie devs, and that's not because I'm very deliberately trying to only find small devs to cover. It's simply because this is a space that those smaller indie devs really dominate in. The reason for that, I think, is largely because cozy games don't have to be graphically intensive or incredibly mechanically complex. And that's not to say that they never are, or that there isn't innovation in the space, but the baseline is far lower in terms of graphical fidelity than in something like the FPS genre, where if you don't have some really cool, highly stylized graphics to differentiate yourself, you need to have photoreal graphics and incredibly complex and probably groundbreaking FPS mechanics. So in contrast, it's much less costly to make a cozy game, or at least it can be. I'm not here to talk about things I know nothing about, and I've never made either game. But we've had pixel art pretty much down since like the 90s at least, and the mechanics are much more simple than having to deal with physics and precision shooting, or at least I assume, given how few high-fidelity indie FPS games there are. Though, do correct me if you have experience that contradicts what I'm assuming. I'm not here to say any game is easy to make, but I think from an indie developer perspective, it's probably a lot more manageable to take on a cozy game than something like a COD competitor. Plus, you have the fact that the big names in the cozy space don't dominate people's attention nearly as much as in something like FPS or Souls games. But that's just why indie devs might be drawn to cozy games. Where does the queerness come in? Well, like I said before, queer culture is very much about community and supporting one another. So the idea of a small developer working out of their home office in their spare time to make a game that can give people what they're looking for just out of the pure love of game development, I think really appeals to a lot of queer people. Plus, there is just the counterculture nature of it all. I think it's very similar to stuff like punk music and indie comics back in the day. It's counter to what the mainstream is doing, and not just for the sake of being contrarian, but because the mainstream gaming world, in general, doesn't really care about the queer community like cozy indie devs do. And you can see that with how these devs do little things which mean a lot to people, like adding custom pronoun options, not locking you into gendered clothing and character customization options, letting you add things like top surgery scars, and actually letting you romance anyone. All in all, I think cozy games are probably one of the most queer segments in gaming. There aren't many communities out there like cozy gamers. Part of the reason I chose to cover cozy games is because I know you all are so supportive and just here to have a good time and not chase controversy and scandal. And that's only been confirmed for me by making this channel. You all are so incredibly wholesome and kind in the comments, and that is exactly what I love so much about cozy games, and one of the many things that really drew me to them. I hope I've been able to convey why I feel cozy games are so intimately tied up with queer people and culture, If you think I left anything out, please leave a comment. I'm sure there are lots of things that I missed, and I can't wait to hear what you all have to say. Also, this is not at all meant to be a proof of the queerness of cozy gaming or anything like that. Nothing I've said is meant to be a definitive argument for that position. I just enjoy opining about these things with you all and hearing what you have to say about it. I think ultimately it really just boils down to the community and the group support that is so inherent in cozy games. The feeling that no matter what you need, someone is there to help you out without any strings attached, and then the feeling of being able to be there for them. That is just so quintessentially both cozy and queer to me, and I think these games do such a great job capturing the spirit of that. But yeah, I think I'll probably just leave it off here. I hope you all enjoyed this video. If you did, please consider leaving a like, and if you want to see more like it, subscribe and ring the bell. I release a new video every Saturday, and that is the best way to make sure you always know when I post. If you would like to support the channel even more, you can hit the join button, but you just being here is more than I could ever ask for. I hope I see you again next week. Have a wonderful rest of your day, and as always, happy gaming.